The Eliminator Round is behind us and the Super 8 has been determined. Let's look at how we got here. In the East, the Somerset Cavaliers defeated the New England Eagles by 66 runs, scoring 139 in the first innings. Sonny Patel once again came up big with 35 runs from 21 balls. The Cavs were aided by 20 extras compared to only one surrendered. Yasser Muhammad, who recently was selected for the BPL, took 3 wickets for 11 runs. Adobadi and Najaf Shah took 2 wickets each to set the tone, and that closed the door on the Eagles' season for 2023. The Cavs advanced to face the defending East champs, the New Jersey Stallions, and that game went right down to a super over thanks to a final ball 6 from the Stallion spinner Sachin Mailavarapu, entering 9 down with a ball to go. But the super over, just like the first innings, belonged to Kennard Lewis, who ended the game with a 6 on the third ball in the Cavaliers' turn to bat.
Kennard Lewis. Oh, Lewis has latched on to this one, and it's game over here. Cavaliers storms the field. Kennard celebrates, and it's Cav going to Texas.
In the South, young leg spinner Adam Khan stopped Lendl Simmons and Obus Pinar just shy of 50s on his way to 3 wickets as Fort Lauderdale Lions restricted the powerhouse Atlanta Fire to 157 for 8. But the early wicket of Tagnarayan Chanderpaul complicated the chase for the Lions. Ravindra Prasad and Brian Gale made it close as the Lions fell short by just 9 runs. The Cavaliers and the Fire will join the Philadelphians and the Atlanta Lightning in the Atlantic Super 4 for a single round-robin group stage to determine the Atlantic champion. The emerging player of the week for the Eliminator stage is Fort Lauderdale's Adam Khan, who took 3 big wickets in the Lions' close loss to Atlanta Fire. Here to discuss the Eliminator Round and help forecast the Super 4s is West Zone correspondent Joe Hickey. Joe, thanks once again for joining me. We have a lot of exciting playoff action to discuss, so let's dig right in and start with the Central.
Yeah, not a ton of time, so we better get right to it. Lone Star Athletics over in the Central, rising up from the dead. They were in 5th place going into the final day of the season, could very easily have been left out of the proceedings entirely, but they're now on their way to Prairie View for the Super 4s, and they got there really with some excellent batting, particularly from the 2 Kumars. We saw Nitish in full effect against the Dallas Exforia Giants, and we saw Milind Kumar basically giving me flashbacks to the San Francisco Unicorns and the Texas Super Kings back on the last day of MLC, putting together a heck of an innings to dispatch what was the number 2 team, the Michigan Cricket Stars.
My goodness, Nitesh Kumar could be the MVP this season. The way that he's played, he came into the season without a half century in minor league cricket to his name. He finished the season, I think, with 4 half centuries, and he just finished with an additional century, the very first century in minor league cricket. We talked on the show last week. We were talking about maybe what their weakness for this team, Lone Star Athletics, might be that they're not the deepest batting team. We don't really know. The top order's taking care of all the work this season. So if you can get through the first 4 or 5 batters, we thought there'd be a good chance that a team could beat them. But they've just defeated 2 excellent teams to advance to the Super 4, and they did it without really exposing themselves. So we still don't know what's going to happen after they lose 4, 5, 6 wickets.
Yeah, well, and they also seem to be living just a little bit of a charmed life these last couple of games, particularly against Dallas. The Exforia Giants shot themselves in the foot a couple of times. A handful of no balls that were taken full advantage of by Nitish Kumar. He had, I think, the 2 no balls from Jaskarandeep Singh Buttar were worth a combined 22 runs. Hit both of them for 6s, had a free hit for a 6, plus the extras, plus a single on another free hit. I mean, just absolutely wrecked those deliveries. And yeah, just what a time for an innings like that from Nitish.
Yeah, and it turned out to be kind of a game where 2 stars faced off. You had Nitish Kumar, who scored 103 from 55 balls to help set that target of 164. And then you had they had to then worry about Akrashit Gomal, who has been phenomenal all season. He converted another half century, but it just wasn't enough to chase that total. At the very end, it came down to a final over where Hamza Khalid defended 11 runs to put the Athletics through to the next game. And yeah, so it pretty much became star versus star there. Milind Kumar, Lakshya Parekh combined to take out Xphoria's top 4 batters in the chase. So we did see the breakthrough of two teams that we didn't think were the deepest batting teams. The team that broke through the top 4 fastest won the game. And of course, Milind Kumar had a phenomenal weekend.
Milind coming up huge, both with ball in hand and plays that ended with the ball in his hand. Took those 3 big wickets to go along with 4 catches in the field, and then comes up with that gigantic innings in the final eliminator against Michigan Cricket Stars. And that in part necessary because Nitish Kumar was unable to fire in that one. Nitish has kind of had this tendency to go really big for a couple games, then a little quieter, then really big for 2 games, then a little quieter. And he repeated it here, gone for just 4 runs, an absolute pearl, taking off the top of leg stump from Muhammad Kamal. And so Milind comes in, partners Jahangir initially. Cheyenne has a couple tasty 4s in there to follow up a 60 he had the prior weekend when they had to win. And then, 72 off 50 for Milind, part of 2 different 50 partnerships, one with Gunasekera and the other with Shubham Ranjane, that one 57 not out to take care of the win. And honestly, just flashbacks to him ending the unicorn season for me.
Yeah, that was great stuff from this team this weekend. Of course, they're heading into the Super 4. Now let's move to the West, which is this is your sweet spot right here.
Oh yeah, and a matchup we've seen a good bit of this season here between the Golden State Grizzlies and the Silicon Valley Strikers. We've talked the last couple of times about the difficulty that the Grizzlies have had over the years. In 2021, the Strikers were the only team that beat them all season, but they beat them 3 times, including the Pacific Conference Championship game. Last year, 2 very resounding defeats. This year, they had a pretty straightforward chase where Malanta and Jadiwala just took it out of their hands. But then that wild game in Davis where it seemed like they were going to get it, then they weren't, then they really should, and then 4 missed run-out chances in 2 balls, and it managed to get away from them. And we saw something this weekend that felt a little bit like a slow-motion version of that. It began as many of these things have this season for Golden State, with a fantastic innings from Anthony Bramble, though.
Right, and we saw 19 wickets in this matchup, in this game. We saw it go down to the final ball, final wicket. It was, everything was at stake, and this was basically a full count with the bases loaded, kind of. Bottom of the 9th, either you do or you don't. 2 outs, situation. Of course, I don't need to make too many more baseball comparisons there. getting ahead of myself or getting away with myself. But yeah, Golden State they just couldn't finish the batting. They couldn't get those last 3 balls. They ended with 3 balls left on the table. They got bowled out with 3 balls to spare. And so often you get bowled out and you leave a couple balls on the table, that comes back to haunt you. And they could have used those 3 balls. They scored 4 runs from those 3 balls, and they put this one away, or just one. Apparently, just one might have done it. But yeah, as you mentioned, Anthony Bramble was fantastic. He couldn't get any help from anybody else. Nobody else got into double figures. The second leading scorer was extras at 9, tied with Shiva Mishra. The Grizzlies couldn't get a whole lot done with the bat, but they came back so strong with the ball in the field, and they're in fielding in general in that game. They fielded well. They took a couple of runouts. They made it really close. And then you get to the end of this innings, and you've got Kulvinder Singh, fighting the whole game for this team, bowling extremely well. How many times have you seen him in a pressure situation for the other team when the shoe's on the other foot? And they had a chance to win the game there on that last run out opportunity. Tough having to win the game trying to hit one stump basically from the side like that, but it was there. They could have won that game.
No, absolutely. I mean, you mentioned the bowling there. Kulvinder took out Surrey early. The fielding, this one made me a little bummed that we didn't have a multi-camera feed for this one, because Zia Shahzad took an absolute blinder directly in front of my position over at long off to dismiss Lahida Milantha, backpedaling, stumbling, grabbed it before he hit the deck. All I can do is Vin Scully this thing, keeping the baseball references going. But they got a little bit of stability from Rahul Jariwala and Shahan Jayasuriya, and then Zia Shahzad hit with the ball. He takes 3 wickets in 4 overs just for 14 runs. He's been really good down toward the end of the season. And I thought they had it taken care of. Your guy from Morrisville, Colin Archibald, came in, got a 4 and a 6 off Fagella, knocked it down to 18 off 36. And full disclosure, I left at that point. I was meeting some friends. I said, okay, they're good. And as I'm getting into my car, Archibald holds out to Kakani. I'm just like, oh dear heavens. I had to continue onward, but I'm sitting there with it on my dashboard the whole way. And they took it down to the wire. Vagella with a maiden, as you said, the runouts, just really phenomenal stuff. And it was fascinating that the final matchup came down to Kulvinder Singh, ex-striker, now with the Grizzlies, versus Anshul Singh, ex-Grizzly, now with the Strikers. Lots of familiarity there on all parts. And even that last over had the same swings. They needed 7 off 6 after having needed 7 off 15. They turn around and get a 4 to really cut it down. Then Paji comes back with 2 dots. And now you've got Anshul and the number 11, Dev Tadani, having to get some singles to get it done. And credit to them, they get it done there with the bat in hand. Guys that probably didn't wake up expecting to have the decisive innings with the bat in hand.
Yeah, both things were on song.
Oh, goodness.
Unfortunately, only one of them could advance. But yeah, that was.
I've been looking for that pun all weekend. Beautiful.
You inspired me there. I could sense that. But yeah, Zia Shahzad pulled that game back with that wicket, as you mentioned, and he's been phenomenal the last few weeks. So this was a great game. It was another one of those games for the ages in the West that we see. It seems like at the end of every season, there's 1 or 2 of these that just come right down to the end that we're always going to remember. And it's a shame that it was on single camera. But what a great game. And now we know who advances to the Super 4 along with East Bay, and it's the Silicon Valley Strikers, and it's the Dallas Mustangs, and then obviously the Lone Star Athletics. So tomorrow or today, if you're watching this, it's today. It's in a few minutes. But we've got the East Bay Blazers facing off against the Silicon Valley Strikers, and this is a really great matchup. This is a team that's these 2 teams have clashed so many times. As you mentioned before, the Grizzlies versus the Strikers is a rivalry for sure. But the Grizzlies haven't had much success versus the Strikers. We got a little bit more parity here with the Strikers versus the East Bay Blazers.
Yeah, these two 1-1 last year, split the pair of them as the only loss Silicon Valley took. This season they only played one time. They abandoned the rematch, I believe, because it just wasn't going to affect the standings at all, and why go ahead and extend the season by another day at that point. But the matchup in Santa Clara 2 weekends back, absolutely down to the wire, good push and pull between both of them. What I'm interested to see here is Silicon Valley has had a way this year of learning about a team in that first matchup and then destroying them the second time around. This season, they're 2-3 the first time they meet up with a team. They lost to East Bay, they lost to SoCal, and they fell as well to Seattle. They are now 4-0 in second meetings against the team. The only one they haven't had a second meeting against is East Bay. So I'm excited for this one. It was close the first time, and Silicon Valley always seems to have that little something extra when you punch them in the mouth the first time.
Oh, absolutely, they do. They've got a winning heritage. They're one of the most winningest teams in the league, and here they are once again, pretty much finals weekend. So we'll see how this one boils down. What do you think? What do you think Silicon Valley is going to have to do to beat East Bay in this game? Where's their strength? Where do they match up well?
Well, the big thing they've been doing really well so far, and this was the case even in their loss to East Bay, but the other 4 games they've had to end the season, it's their middle overs bowling. The spinners when they come in, Srinivas Raghavan, Pranay Suri when he's on song, and most recently Shahan Jayasuriya, have been absolutely nasty. And you take a look at East Bay, they do have Aditya Ganesh in the middle who has helped stitch together some pretty good partnerships. Somebody like Jayasuriya can shut down a left-hander. This season, he has got the most goofy statistics against left-handed batting. He's got an economy of 2.04 against them, and he's taken 5 wickets for 16 runs. He is absolutely lethal against lefties. I'm interested to see what he does when that part of East Bay's lineup gets in there. But that's really been the way of it for them. They have gotten that lockdown in the middle overs. They've kept the scores under control. They've dismissed important batters, and they've given themselves something that they can chase, since they very frequently are looking to chase and play that second innings. With bat in hand, it has really come down to Lahiru Milanta. Their games are a coin flip. Basically, if he doesn't get to at least, we don't actually know where the boundary is. He's got 4 scores over 30, and they're 4-0, and none of them have been close. He's also got 6 scores of 12 or lower, and they're 3-3 in those games, and every one of them has come down to the final over. So it's going to be an interesting thing there. If Milanta's nailed early, everything's in play. Who knows what you're going to see? But if he fires, and if he can build a partnership with either Jadiwala, who's been really steady recently, or with Jayasuriya, who's been a little off song compared to last year, but still is Shahan, that is a game that I think that Silicon Valley can get right on. And I think if the batting is a little better and the bowling keeps doing what they've been doing, they're going to be tough to beat.
Right. Yeah. I think you're right. I'm really looking forward to that matchup. Another matchup going back to the Central here. We got the two Texas teams, the Lone Star Athletics versus the Dallas Mustangs. And this one's, as we mentioned before, the weakness, I think, for Lone Star is maybe their strength is the same thing as their weakness, I should say. They've got a great top 4, but they're winning or losing because of that. They only have 4 batters with over 100 runs on the season, and you have to question the depth of their batting. Meanwhile, Dallas, we know that they have 8 major league players on this team. This is a historically good team as far as the league is concerned. But they have 6 batters with over 100 runs. They're getting contributions. They bat so deep. You're never out of the woods against this team, and this is why I kind of give them the edge in this particular matchup. Everyone's going to have to fire on. Well, I mean, both of these teams. We're getting to a place that's difficult to bat at, which is Prairie View. It might be the ultimate equalizer here. You're going to have to stick around. You don't want to lose a whole bunch of wickets. You want to stick around. We're looking at maybe 150, 160 score would be a good score. I think we don't know until we'll see the wicket tomorrow. But I think Dallas is coming into this with an attitude that's where they're just scoring so many runs, and Lone Star's coming in here, and they're being led by their stars. So we'll see which one of these approaches kind of works best. But yeah, I think with Dallas, they have just so many weapons. They're just so deep that I think they got to have the edge in this particular matchup. And but once again, we got the Kumars.
Yeah. No, you look at this matchup from my perspective. I mean, it's tempting to look at the batting. Really, I think it's going to have to come down to the bowling and who manages to strike a couple of times and take out a few of these big guns. Right. As you said, Dallas just incredibly deep. They faltered a bit on opening day, and I remember that opening weekend. We were all wondering, like, wait a second, we thought we understood what was coming at us from the Mustangs.
Right.
And they had a loss to Lone Star and then went to a super over to get the win against Houston. And that required I think it was an acrobatic Kenjige catch just to get them to the super over.
That was right.
And so they have come a long way since then. I tend to also give Dallas the edge on this, just in part because they showed what they're made of the second time they faced Lone Star. We got a really good look at what they're capable of. And just with that being more recent and a bit more on the expectations we had coming in, it obviously can't completely rule out a Lone Star upset there, but Dallas, I would feel, is pretty heavily favored in that matchup.
Right, and they've done this with Sujit Gowda scoring under 100 strike rate, which is weird because of all the batters, of the first 9 batters to make it to 1,000 runs in minor league cricket, he had the highest strike rate combined of anybody, aggregate, from all the seasons put together. So let's move on now and quickly cover the other 2 teams, the teams in the Atlantic, the other 2 games in the Atlantic. You got the Atlanta Lightning versus the Atlanta Fire. The Fire obviously just advanced against Fort Lauderdale. Fort Lauderdale put up a great fight. That was an amazing game. But now we got Atlanta Lightning versus Atlanta Fire. Atlanta Lightning's 2-0 against Atlanta Fire this season, which surprised a lot of people. Once again, you mentioned how the Mustangs got off to a slow start. The Fire got off to a slow start this season, and it was because of the Atlanta Lightning. And Atlanta Lightning obviously feature, their captain has a ton of success in this league, Unmuk Chand. But Unmuk Chand has been upstaged with the bat by Mark Parchment, who has put together an excellent career in minor league cricket. He's always contributing. Always putting up good numbers, but they really haven't had a chance to bat. The wickets in the Atlantic have been difficult this season, but so we haven't seen a ton of real T20 style scoring from players. What we've gotten from Atlanta Lightning is that their bowling has been super consistent. They field well. They have a lot of energy in the field. Unmuk Chand usually makes sure that his team has a lot of discipline.
Oh yeah.
So we got Fani Samhadri who leads the team in wickets. Hussein Talat, Neve McNally. What a fun player he's been to watch, taking almost 2 wickets a game. We'll see which of these players stand up. Pankaj Rao, who started off for a couple of games with in the West over there with Silicon Valley Strikers, moved over to Atlanta. So they've got a lot of bowling options. They got Heath Richards, obviously another young player who hasn't played in a while. I think he injured his shoulder. But yeah, this looks like a really good matchup. The Atlanta rivalry we're going to see here. I kind of got to favor the Atlanta Fire simply because of their depth. They're coming off of this victory. So that's they've played more recently. They just have so many weapons in that team. I kind of got to give them the edge, but it's just a small, tiny edge right here. And it's just because I think their batting is deeper. Both of the teams have tremendous bowling.
Well, I'd have to imagine of all the people that the Atlanta Fire would want to see right out of the gate in the playoffs back here in this round, Fani Samhadri is about bottom of the list after last year with Seattle. That's not going to be somebody they're excited to see back there. You mentioned Unmuk Chand, and I do think with somebody like a Mark Parchment who can take some of the scoring burden, at least the quick scoring burden off, that actually is kind of where Chand seems to be more comfortable. You recall a lot of the work that he did the last 2 seasons was basically in partnership with the likes of a Shahan Jayasuriya, certainly in opening partnerships. He's somebody who is very comfortable at that ODI scoring rate. I think some of those rough pitches in the Atlantic may actually be kind of favoring that approach. He's somebody who's ready to go do that. And you mentioned here in Houston, we're going to see that in Prairie View, you're going to see that same potential sort of issue. I think it's somewhere where he gets to slot into a role he's more comfortable with. He can take a game away from you 100%. If you let him survive to the middle and death overs. But in the power play,
absolutely.
Yeah, in the power play, that's where he needs that partner so that he can be the metronome and let somebody else express himself. Kind of a David White situation as well.
Right. Yeah. This is the afternoon games. The Atlantic games take place in the afternoons. This one's a 2 p.m. start. Moving on quickly to the East matchup between the Philadelphians and the Cavaliers. The Cavaliers, as I mentioned before this segment, advanced past the New Jersey Stallions in spectacular fashion, winning a super over after conceding a last ball 6. That was incredible. But the Philadelphians and the Somerset Cavaliers have only matched up once. One of the they were supposed to match up twice, but we had a rain out basically. So the Cavaliers got the best of the Philadelphians the first time, bowled them out in the process. So this is maybe this was a team that Philadelphians would not have wanted to see advance. Maybe they would have rather face the Stallions, if anyone could ever say such a thing. But yeah, it's they're a very good team. Both of these teams are good. We're going to see this on better wickets now. The East has had the slowest scoring games. Let's see how this works out. We got a lot of unknowns here, so I think this one's just kind of a toss up. Philly's got a very good team, had a lot of success this season, but they're coming off of a couple of losses in the last 2 weeks, and whereas the Cavaliers are coming in on a high. So I think that makes a difference. And they've just played a game. They just won against a team that's had their number in the past. So we'll see how this one goes.
Yeah, definitely a vote for momentum on that one. And we talked about LSA kind of having to come back from the dead in terms of winning that game at the end of the season to even qualify. There was debate and concern. We weren't sure whether the Cavaliers made it or not due to all the tiebreakers and the issue with the forfeits that benefited the New England Eagles. So they just went and settled it on the field, and I think the Cavaliers pretty much removed all doubt in that one. Really, one of the only laughers of the entire weekend. We've been blessed with a fantastic group of wild card eliminators here in minor league cricket, and now we get a chance to look at the best of the best facing off for the next 3 days and figuring out who comes out on top.
Yeah, well, I can't wait, Joe. Thanks for joining me.
My pleasure, Nate.